Okay, now looking at slide 12, there's a lot of information packed in here. Sorry about that. I'm afraid this connection is just not doing what it needs to be doing. Continually starting and starting over again. So I'm not going to talk to each one of these points, but the important thing to emphasize is that Taiwan's importance as a supply base during the Vietnam War contributed greatly to the economy, but did not encourage heavy industrialization of the kind that the South Koreans pursued after 1965. There was a good amount of government planning involved, and there was the development of light industry, but it wasn't until the United States shifted its recognition, or in 1979 to the PRC, and in the intervening years between Nixon's trip to China in 1972, that 7-year period when the writing was on the wall, so to speak, that the KMT government decided to step up efforts to attract foreign investment, and the electronics industry had already gotten a good start, starting from the 1960s, mostly the 1970s and into the 80s is when the domestic electronics industry really took off, and then other companies from outside began to develop manufacturing capabilities there as well. And the economy began to shift to this high-tech orientation that it has today. Along with that came a lot of organized crime influence, unfortunately, that made itself apparent in thefts, physical thefts of commodities, and the theft of intellectual property. And as we discussed last week, organized crime, the Bamboo Gang, was actually used by a rogue element within the KMT government to assassinate a political opponent of Jiang Jingbo, then the president, that's the son of Chiang Kai-shek, to assassinate a political opponent of his in the United States. And that's when the government began to crack down on these gangs. Let's go on to slide 13 and talk about Hong Kong and Macau. Hong Kong and Macau also did not pursue heavy industry development. Their strengths were different, but they were related to each other, as their economies were linked, both being on the South China coast in the 1950s, being places that were communicating with each other regularly, that were friendly to each other politically because of the close, not only the close geographical position that they held with each other just across the Pearl River Delta, but because of the old alliance, centuries old, between the British and the Portuguese. So those two colonial governments cooperated to advance the administration of the two colonies, and after 1980, with Chinese development proceeding across the border from both places, there was an accelerated money flow between all of these areas. The Hong Kong economy particularly became a financial center during this period leading up to the 1980s. Macau had had always been, for I think 3 centuries, had had legalized gambling that was not openly tolerated elsewhere in the region. Macau did not have a very well-developed economy, but after 1980, the gaming industry, as it calls itself, the gambling sector, began to take over an increasing share of the economy. There was definitely double-digit growth in this small area of economic activity, and with it came a lot of gang warfare. It was interesting then, as it is even today. If you go to Macau, you might go to the Hotel Lisboa, which is the short tower there in the center of that picture. And you go to the first floor where people buy their chips before they go out onto the gambling floor. And you will probably see, as I've seen a number of times when visiting Macau, you'll see people with bulging suitcases full of cash. And this is cash that is, for the most part, public money from China. That is money that has been embezzled by Chinese government bureaucrats and brought to Macau to gamble with, or simply to launder. An easy way to launder money is to bring a suitcase full of it to Macau, walk into a casino, change it into chips at the HSBC, the Hong Kong Shanghai Banking Corporation window in the casino, go out on the floor, spend a few chips on some gambling, and then take all your chips back and change them into cash and walk out the door. So that's a great way to launder money and hide its origin and take it and put it maybe in Switzerland, where you can use it to educate your children or something like that. But not to get all wrapped up in that sort of thing. After 1980, this again, the development of both of these places as financial centers and Macau as a gambling center really accelerated. Let's go on to slide 14 and talk about Singapore. Singapore, before independence, was indeed a business center, but it was relatively quiet compared to subsequent decades. It's also a relatively naughty place compared to today. It's known today as a place that bans chewing gum and flogs people for minor offenses, and has a unbelievably efficient surveillance state and so on. You talk to people in Singapore today, and they can remember their grandfathers, if they were so inclined, smoking opium at home. Not so today. Singapore is an ultra-clean place in many ways. Much less social diversity than before. Lee Kuan Yew's pragmatic tilt left in the 1950s, leading up to the independence era, 1962 to 1965, when Malaysia was independent and before Singapore was kicked out, was entirely pragmatic. It was to maintain support in the Chinese community, and Lee Kuan Yew was ultimately thrown out. It was highly personal by the Malays of Malaysia. He wanted to have Malaysia for the Malaysians, and what that meant was that Malaysia should try to put an end to ethnic politics, and that it should not only be a Malay who could hold the top office of Prime Minister. Lee Kuan Yew, perhaps the most effective politician in the region then and now, was certainly had in his sights the office of the Prime Minister of Malaysia. But the United Malay National Organization, or UMNO, in a quest to guarantee a Malay ethnic majority in the electorate, worked, as I think we discussed previously, to acquire from the British East Malaysia in order to boost the ethnic Malay numbers in the electorate, and they decided to get rid of Singapore, which was 70 or 75% Chinese at the time. We'll stop here and go on to slide 15.